Open world games. A genre that seems to have an abundance of suitors, but in reality, many of them don't appreciate when a developer releases a masterclass for exactly what the open world market asks for. I want a game that lets me do whatever. I'm sure you've heard this at some point in one form or another, and it's quite a valid aspect to desire in a game, but is that what they truly want? Skyrim, the Horizon games, even Fallout. These are names of just some of the games that claim to provide an open world for their players to navigate and explore to their heart's desire, but fall flat when you pick at what actually qualifies them as open world games. And yes, you probably guessed correctly. This is another video you've stumbled across that shills the living shit out of Elden Ring.
Thy kind are all of a piece.
Before I incriminate myself further than I already did by saying Skyrim fell flat as an open world game, let me clarify what I mean by open world as a genre and what I would hope to get out of one of its games. If a game declares that it functions in an open world setting, in my perfect world, that entails being able to expect every single route a new player would take in the game to lead to a different but equally valuable position of context towards the overarching progression of the entire game. Some games cheap out on this a little bit by constructing an ascending difficulty typically based around your character's level. This has its own benefits and detriments. On one hand, this ensures that no matter the path chosen, the player will never feel cheated by a stat check in any given area. But on the other hand, it almost entirely eliminates the sense of scale and intimidation of what is intended to be the path to complete the game. I think there's some validity to say that some of the value in a given piece of content stems from how helpless you may initially feel against it. If the scale of an area or boss is solely carried by its context in the respective story or quest line it's a part of, then it doesn't do its job of providing its scale correctly in my eyes. Sometimes the intended scariest contextual enemies in the game can be compared to these shitty fucking Falmer assholes, and if that happens, then you failed to make your progression as an open world game feel genuine. Now let's take a game that deploys a similar strategy to attempt to balance progression with an ascending difficulty slider. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Though using the same system of progressing the difficulty level with progression in-game, there is no shortage of context lying around every corner to make the player anxious of the areas they have yet to encounter. With less focal points to it than Skyrim, it's a bit easier for Breath of the Wild to focus on its strength as an open world game, being the endless discoverables it contains. But this isn't an excuse for how barren some of these games, not just Skyrim, feel in between those focal points. Now, I can't sit here with a straight face and act like I didn't enjoy Skyrim. It's surely an all-time RPG, but at the same time, you can't sit here with a straight face and act like having to run in a straight line for 10 minutes, sometimes up basically vertical mountains, was an admirable portion of Skyrim's gameplay. Sure, you might run into an encounter with a bandit trying to take your money, or a courier delivering you a message, but that can happen actually anywhere, which doesn't make any of those encounters feel like they mean anything. Take Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2. Each of these games have sprawling worlds that make those iterations of random encounters feel much more genuine because you're enthralled in the setting, where coming across another random lady getting your purse taken is much more enjoyable and a natural interaction than this.
Never should have come here.
And there's plenty of space for these encounters to happen, because the overworld just feels so... Grand Theft Auto kind of cheats by literally being a representation of a living, functioning city, but even Elden Ring, a much more accurate comparison to Skyrim's fantasy-type world, has events to take part in any direction you look. Sometimes you can even just glance at some of these soldiers and think to yourself about how real they look and how a part of the environment they are as you trek through this wide open landscape. On the topic of Elden Ring, I would forget what the main story objective was all the time because of the sheer amount of distractions you could be tempted to explore in any given region that lead to something substantial. This gives the player an alternative sense of reward from the game apart from spamming down the main quest line. In fact, I didn't even learn that the game was supposed to be pointing me in any direction until I'd gone so far in the wrong one, my friend felt the need to steer me towards the right way. I had heard about the game's first boss, Margit, who's around here, and I was all the way down here. But that's what I had taken the game for. I was roaming around in search of the first boss, and I would have come across it at one point or another, but I was so enthralled in what I was being rewarded for by exploring, not in terms of the items I was receiving, that certainly helped, but for how unique of an experience I felt I earned by getting creative and analyzing the landscape for what may seem out of place. A dense and diverse open world like Elden Ring is the kind that will allow you to head straight in the wrong direction and still feel like you're going the right way. Though to some, the wrong direction will become clear very soon as you stumble across an enemy 30 or 40 levels higher than you, essentially telling you to turn around. But, to be honest, this is what calls back to what I was saying about proper presentation of scale in these kinds of games. Those enemies will forever be that level and waiting for you if you choose to come back. This allows for those who seek the most thrill and danger to see if they can stack up against this blatant disadvantage, and those who want to surmount the challenge later when they're a bit more capable, to both have an option of how they want to go about experiencing this hurdle. And I'm not sure about you, but seeing something so daunting and blatantly overpowered gives me excitement for the scope of power I may eventually attain if those are the enemies I'm expected to defeat at some point. It's that scope that gives you the context, not what you're told through story. To nail an open world game is no easy task by any means. And that sentiment is exactly why I find Elden Ring so astronomically impressive. It's From Software's first attempt at the open world landscape, and they put on an absolute show. Until recently, games like Skyrim or Fallout were golden standards of how to treat the scope of your open world game. Skyrim and Fallout's worlds are not the forefront of what carries the player through the entire length of the game. It's how awesome of RPGs they are and how you're allowed to feel like your individually crafted character made their trek through the various storylines you're thrusted into as you play through them. I'm incredibly interested in how the open world genre takes form over the next few years, and how games will attempt to be the next innovating and ceiling-breaking experience like Elden Ring has been for so many. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe and comment your thoughts. I always enjoy reading others' outlooks on the topic, as these videos are very subjective. Thanks for watching.